Peter is our foreign speaker, our keynote speaker. Welcome to you, Peter. You are, I guess you're pretty tired after the long travel here to Denmark. No, actually, it's late evening in the States now, and it's not even the 3rd of November. But you're with us, and you're up late, and we are very happy to welcome you here to this session. So please, the floor is yours, Peter.
Thank you very much. Really, really honored and happy to be here. So I hit share screen. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and desktop 2. I have to hit share. Okay. I want to start with just a little centering mindfulness exercise just to get us all present. And we're going to do a visualization to get us in the mood for talking about nature. So I invite you to close your eyes. This will be very short. Close your eyes, get comfortable in your chair. Taking a deep breath and breathing in, breathing out. Feel the sensation of your breathing. Invite your breath to feel really good, even pleasurable. Breathing in, breathing out. I invite you to recall a special place in nature from one of your earliest childhood memories. When you were little and you were out in the wild, natural world. Visualize that time and that place, that memory. It could be a special tree, a place by a stream, just a green space in your backyard. You might have been with a favorite relative. Remember the sight, the sounds, the smells. Notice the breath that wants to happen as you recall this memory. Bring your hand to your chest and give yourself gratitude that you have this memory of being a child and being in nature. And smile. Now I invite you to write in the chat box just a couple of sentences of this memory, just very short. But Søren and I are very excited to collect hundreds of rich little nature images. So you can just write, you know, by the stream with my grandfather or something in the chat box. Just take 20 seconds and just write a couple of sentences about your nature memory as a child. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So a little bit about my background. I was very lucky as a young boy, as a 6-year-old. Some family friends took me to the mountains to go skiing. And I fell in love with the mountains and with nature and with adventure at that early age. At 9 years old, someone took me rock climbing. That's actually a photo of my rock climbing first day when I was 9 years old. I really committed my life to mountain adventure and became a guide, a full-time guide at the busiest mountaineering school in the United States, in Yosemite, climbing El Capitan for a job. And I've had a whole career based on the deep felt premise that these immersive experiences in nature were transformative for people. They really, really opened people's hearts and minds and helped them a lot. I'm going to show you a short little video clip that'll a little bit about that past and how it looks when we're teaching today.
I spent my whole adolescence just passionate about rock climbing. I was the youngest outing leader they've ever had. At 15 years old, I was listed in the catalog teaching climbing lessons in Yosemite. I had to say, don't forget to give me a ride because I don't have a license yet. From the age of 15, I was committed to helping other people access this sport. And as an instructor and a guide, early on, I really understood how profoundly transformative this experience was, or I'd say these experiences, like immersive experiences in mountain environments, really change people. Go slow, little steps over the edge, just little steps wide. Keep your feet wide, please. We see that this embodied peak experience, and it doesn't have to be climbing. It can just be walking the rough trail to get up to this cliff. It can be crossing a creek on a log. It can be snowshoeing in deep snow. It can be kayaking on the lake on a windy day. All of these things engage the vestibular, the proprioceptive, the sensory motor parts of our nervous system, which we believe, and today neuroscience supports, these inputs strengthen the sense of self. And when a young person who's had a real traumatic background strengthens their sense of self, their self-awareness grows, their self-efficacy grows, and their behavior changes. They're able to really improve or be healed. Everybody is scared. When I do this, I think it's pretty scary. That's not the point. The point is, can we get scared and still move? All this time I spend in mountain adventures has given me a strong sense of self. I spend a lot of time alone in nature. I do big solo trips along the spine of the Sierra. I'll cross-country ski for 36 hours and cover 40 miles. Deeper breath out. Longer, do one more. In. Look at me. Out. For these kids, it's a powerful experience that we really see and believe builds their resilience, builds their grit. We're all going to be scared when we do it. Can we be scared, take a breath, and still take that step? Maybe we can't, but it's really powerful to get to that edge, to have your nervous system have that experience right on that edge of flight or fight, or soothe and settle. So you're good. Look at me, take a deep breath in, deep breath out. Nice, Luciana, keep it going. I developed a relationship with nature that'll never end.
In our work for the last 14 years, we've worked with over 20,000 youth. And increasingly, we see youth who are suffering more. And this, maybe it's a little bit worse in the United States for a number of reasons, but we're reading research and data coming in from all over the Western world that kids are less resilient, less healthy. In the United States, we have some really alarming statistics I'll share in a minute. And our systems for helping youth, we in our country, we think are broken. You know, just a lot of medication is given to kids. The therapeutic services are very sporadic. Our healthcare system needs a lot of improvement. And we think nature is a way to improve this. Some alarming and disturbing statistics. Huge increase in kids suffering from major depression and anxiety, and sadly, suicide is rising very dramatically. Also, a survey that's done every year of high school students right now, kids are sharing that they're feeling much more lonely than they used to feel. We think overall disconnection is the real root of this suffering, just disconnection from each other, disconnection from ourselves, and disconnection from community. This pandemic, this COVID pandemic is exacerbating this. It's making it worse. And in our country, we're really tracking the increase in the deaths of despair. So we track deaths of despair as suicide, drug overdose, and liver failure from alcoholism. And there's estimates that we will see not as many people that have died from COVID, but like 80 to 90,000 increase over the baseline of deaths of despair. So that's very concerning. In our work, our company works across a range of 3 different programs, all utilizing nature. Sierra Experience is a school field trip program. So it's environmental literacy, social emotional learning, and mountain adventure for visiting schools. In a wide range, some very low income schools for people who are low income, and expensive private schools as well. On the other side, we have our wellness programs, Four Roots Wellness, and these are classes in our local region for the alternative education schools. And we take those kids out outside into nature on field trips and some daily adventures. And then we have Whole Hearts, Minds, and Bodies, and this is nature-based therapeutic mentoring. So this is an intensive program for very high need kids. These are kids who are barely hanging in to be able to stay with their families. If they get any worse, they get sent to a hospital or to an institution. So they have very kind of extreme behavior, serious emotional disturbance. Maybe a kid who has a suicide attempt, they get referred to us, or some kids have serious learning difficulties, and maybe they were getting bullied and then they're depressed. So we developed our method in response to the high need kids, but we see that it applies across all of our work. And increasingly, we give talks about this because we see that it applies for any family. And that's in the method I'm going to talk about today. Our mission is to transform the lives of youth through nature-based learning and wellness adventures. By reconnecting to self, to nature and community, youth of all backgrounds learn, heal, and thrive. Our method we call 4 Roots for Growing a Human. Those roots are authentic relationship, a container for youth to grow their self-awareness, nature connection, the sensorium of nature, the inputs of relaxing and recovering from nature. Root number 3, we call embodied peak experience. This is the intensive, immersive flow state activity that we get from challenges in nature. And then root number 4 is helping others, connecting to community through service. For the therapeutic side, we have a very effective and efficient delivery system where a licensed clinician, a licensed therapist, clinically supervises 4 to 6 therapeutic mentors who are well-trained, who are each treating a small caseload, like 1, 2, 3, or 4 kids each week. Today, we have 50 kids on our caseload, and we have a waiting list. So the framework of our treatment method is all of these roots working together in concert. And we find a lot of connection with humanistic psychology and some very current theory and practice in trauma treatment in the United States, which one is the neurosequential model of therapeutics from Dr. Bruce Perry and the Child Trauma Academy in Texas. And the other is a body of work called sensory motor arousal regulation treatment. And this is very interesting therapy for very dysregulated kids that happens in a padded room with swings and trampolines and jumping and spinning. We feel like we're essentially doing that in the outside, in nature, in the rough terrain. So we'll talk about, I'm going to go into detail about each of these roots. So authentic relationship, when we study kids who struggle, who have a setback, and then they recover. Maybe they suffered from severe anxiety or depression. Maybe they had a trouble with substance use, with drugs or alcohol, or they had a severe loss. When they make it through, the number one factor we see in all the studies is that those kids usually have a consistent, caring relationship with a non-parental adult. This is across the board. So we are providing that professionally. We also feel like our society, our modern society, there is so much disconnection. We find it useful as a framework to offer to families to imagine how we lived 2,000, 3,000 years ago. We used to be in these deeply interdependent bands of 45 to 60 people. And the adolescents in those societies, in those tribes, learn to connect to other adults around them, to learn the skills they needed to become useful members of their community. The nuclear family was not so at the center. It was, the boys learned to hunt from other men, and the girls learned to gather and weave baskets from other women. And today's adolescents are still wired that way. They crave connecting to other adults. And we find that connection in sharing nature can be so powerful. Another framework of authentic relationship is our stance on behavioral change. A lot of these kids have professionals saying, like, you need to change your behavior. And we don't do that. We're with the kid. We're having an authentic relationship. The child has to change themselves. The youth has to want to change. It's up to them to change. This is the humanistic view. We want our relationship to be a container in which their self-awareness can grow. And with growing self-awareness, they start making decisions they don't regret. A key part of authentic relationship is deep listening. We love this quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. Deep listening is the type of listening that can help relieve the suffering of the other person. You can call it compassionate listening. You listen with only one purpose: to help them empty their heart. Nature, root number 2 for us. There is so much growing research about the health benefits of nature. Nature makes us healthy. There is, in the United States, there are a number of studies of a lot. The common one is to look at the impacts on the biomarkers of stress. So they have people going out into nature at certain frequency, certain duration, and they're checking their cortisol levels, they're checking their cytokine expression of inflammation, their DHEA hormone levels, and their vagal nerve tone from heart rate variability. And they are finding consistently that nature really, time in nature helps us activate the parasympathetic nervous system. It helps us rest and recover, or tend and befriend. That very important aspect, and especially in our modern lives. There's just last week, you probably all read this too. This paper came out of Finland, a report out of Finland that a kindergarten, they took the kids and they put them on more natural surface on the forest floor, and they showed a very significant improvement in their immune system. Their microbiome internally in their gut improved, and on their skin in just 28 days of exposure. These are very interesting studies. In California, we are part of a great project where as on a statewide level, we are building a toolkit called The Clinician's Guide to Healing Trauma in California's Outdoors. So it's accessing the research and convincing doctors to start prescribing nature to their low-income patients. These would be families on Medi-Cal, and how to get to the park, how to maybe access a program to help the kid get into the park, because a lot of our citizens, our children, do not have access to green space. So this is going to be nature as medicine, and that's a growing movement in our country. Ultimately, the impact of nature is the sensorium, accessing the life force, all the rich colors and scents and sights. And I'm going to play a short video and share a reading just to kind of awaken that imagery in us. This is a reading from David Abram. Language is not a uniquely human possession. Every bird, every rock face, every bend in the gushing stream carries the power of meaningful speech. Obviously, these other beings do not speak with a human tongue. That is, they don't speak in words. They may speak in song, like numerous birds, or in rhythm, like the crickets in the ocean waves. Meaning arises from meeting, from feeling the contact between oneself and what is not oneself. Meaning arises from the encounter between oneself or a river or the surging wind, from the ongoing interaction between oneself and the rest of the earthly cosmos. Many of my thoughts have been shaped by the forest and the tides. They have sprouted like mosses along the trunks of trees or lichens on the surface of stories. My thoughts are informed by the sound of the rhythmic thudding of a raven's wings, or by the late afternoon sunlight spilling across the landscape. This is a language of movements or gestures, of the sound and rhythm of birds' wings, or of the slowly shifting shadows. This viewpoint holds that it is not we who speak, but rather the earth that speaks through us. Countless other styles of existence buzz, whistle, and howl across the land. Communication happens by the tracks of bear and wolf, by the flight of birds, the branching patterns of plants, and the violent calligraphy of lightning against the sky. The primary gift of language is to call ourselves into relationship with our world. Language is a primary way of singing ourselves into relationship with a person, a black bear, or startled snake, with the crescent moon, a tiny purple wildflower, or with all of the cosmos. In the summer, the language of the wind releases a chorus of rustles, whistles, and rattles as it moves through 1,000 green tongues. As we open and engage our senses, we also accomplish much more. We discover relationship. The air flooding in and out of our lungs is the same breath nourishing the frogs chanting across the creek. It's part of the larger circulation of wind rippling the fur of an endangered lynx stalking its prey, and with the respiration of this forest. In this constant exchange, we are in dialogue. Bringing our awareness to this breathing as it rides in and out of our nostrils is to be aware of our relationship between our body and nature. This relationship, this conversation, is where meaning happens. What is meaningful lives right here in this moment, right here, right now. Can you feel it? Embodied peak experience, or route number 3. So if exposure to nature activates the parasympathetic, we are really interested in also activating the sympathetic in a very positive way, this kind of healthy activation. And yes, it is a little bit stressful. Sometimes it can be very stressful, but it's a more positive type of stress. We call this an immersive flow state experience. It can be something like rock climbing, But remember, a lot of the kids we work with are not physically healthy. They're not strong. They've been taking medication, antipsychotics that change their metabolism. A lot of our client youth are overweight, and just not really connected to their bodies at all. So we say we look for the rock climbing immersive experience on flat ground. So that could be like walking on rocks, walking on logs across a creek. Down in the city, I like going to the seawalls on the bay or the riverside and just walking on those rocks. There's still nature. There's seagulls and crabs and the salt air. It doesn't take much, but a little bit of risk, like a little bit of that state where you have to be perfectly present. The prefrontal cortex down regulates, some other aspects of our brains upregulate. And we are just being and just doing. And this is a very powerful experience for people. There's even an element where we call it the natural high. We do a lot of work with youth in substance abuse treatment. And we know in that flow state, they're actually expressing our endocannabinoid called anandamine inside our brains that does cause a little bit of euphoria. It opens up new creative thought patterns. Embodied peak experience. So there's some very interesting neuroscience that supports this theory of the power of this experience. Up in Canada, Dr. Ruth Lanius at the University of Western Ontario has done hundreds and hundreds of brain scans, of fMRI scans on adults who had early childhood trauma. And they see a signature pattern of disconnect in the brain network called the default mode network. And parts of that would be going from the brainstem to the insula to the prefrontal cortex. The insula modulates all of the sensory inputs. And when that's disconnected, that really affects our emotional regulation. And so these adults who had early childhood trauma developed neurologically under toxic stress and didn't make that strong connection. And there's growing theory that this activation of the vestibular seeds in our brainstem going into the vestibular system in our inner ear with our proprioception, the nerve bundles that tell us how our muscles are keeping us connected in space, upright in space, and our sensory motor, that all of those sensory activations done repeatedly and supportedly, like with a caring instructor or guide, so that the child knows they're safe, but they can still push to that edge of risk, get in that flow state and activate those systems. There's the growing hypothesis that these can strengthen those weak connections. And by strengthening those connections, we strengthen the sense of self. So it's multi-sensory integration through this embodied challenge to strengthen sense of self. And we see that. We work with kids who, they go from they get referred to our program and they kind of have this posture, sort of beat down, defeated posture. And it might be, we might have to hold their hand to walk the log across the creek the first few times. But a month later, after 4 or 5 weeks of these sessions going outside, their posture starts to change, that their kinetic ability improves. They have balance, they have pep in their step. They look you in the eye. And we track that with improvements in regulating their emotions, in facing setbacks and challenges, improving resilience, and in improving their relationships with family. And we are surveying for this. We're very interested in adding to the research with some video analysis of how these kids are moving as they go through treatment. I just read a paper, I think a colleague of some of yours, Dr. Matthew Stevenson in Copenhagen, did a study on youth with ADHD. That's a huge thing in the United States. So many kids are diagnosed with this, but in response to nature. And his study found that the nature effect was not as strong as the medication effect. We are very interested in a nature effect with the embodied peak experience, like climbing the tree, not just sitting under the tree, and seeing, what kind of difference that can make. Our final route is helping others or connecting to community through service. This is really important. Kids are looking for this, teenagers especially, for this meaning making. Like, how can they contribute? And this could be as simple as, an older kid helping younger kids. In our program, we are setting up nature wellness walks once a month. So some of our older teenagers and young adults will be trained to lead members of the community on nature health hikes. This helping others, it makes such a difference for these young people. It can also be helping the planet, helping the earth. So this photo, we have kids working on a big restoration project in a big meadow at the headwater of our river. And so, healing the earth is also healing. We love these quotes about helping others. We work on ourselves in order to be of service to others, and we help others in order to work on ourselves, from Pema Chodron. Or Gandhi said, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. It's about being a part of something bigger than yourself. So, 4 routes for growing a human. We do assessments every 3 months on these kids in our program, and we're finding very significant positive results. Overall reduction in symptomatic distress of 30%, and some higher marks on like interpersonal distress and somatic distress. So we're looking at doing more and more research. We want to write papers about this, and we are trying to spread our method. We do think the system of care in America needs a big dose of nature as medicine, whether it's in behavioral health or physical health. We have so many people with hypertension and diabetes and all these problems that walking outside in the woods will really be helpful. So 4 routes for growing a human: authentic relationship, connecting to nature, embodied peak experience, and helping others or connecting to community through service. I am happy to take your questions, and I want to say tak. And it's a pleasure to share with you. And we will send some resources to Soren. We have a whole package of activities to share with you by email. Tak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. Thank you for the presentation. And in this last part of the presentation, you mentioned some numbers and some facts actually about the effects of your methods there. And I also have a question here from Laura Kroh, and she asked about, well, do you have some numbers or facts about the effect of playing in nature regarding their self-esteem or self-confidence, the kids you're having in your center?
Well, we are still, I would say we are early in trying out different assessments. So in all of our sessions are playful. A typical session lasts for 3 hours. And so it is challenging in our method to pull out the different parts. It's sort of, it all works together. So it's playing in nature, but it's also the relationship with the therapeutic mentor or the guide. But I think because it is the shared experience, the playing. We say that instead of sitting across, eye to eye on a couch in an office, we're shoulder to shoulder, exploring. So, but in terms of, being able to have surveys that I isolate the different inputs, that is challenging, because we feel like they all work in concert.
Yeah, and there is another question here, and maybe it connects with that, because it's a question about transfer to back to their family. You're starting saying that it was kids and young people with a kind of rough background, and do you following them after you have had them in a period, and how long do you have them in your programs, and do you following them afterwards regarding transfer to their life and their family?
Yes, very good question. And yes, we do. What's beautiful about our method is we really get to know the family, because we pick the kid up from school, spend 3 hours outside, and then we bring them home after dark. We come in the living room, we meet the family. And when it works really well, the young person starts taking their family on the hikes that we showed them, that we taught them. And so, but we have a lot of kids in college now who stay in contact with us. We have some young people working for us who've come through our program. One's in the audience tonight. You're helping us. So we actually, and then the question of how long do we work? Some of our young people had very severe trauma. We have worked with a few people for 5 years, and it can be a long engagement. Some people do 1 year or 6 months, and they don't need it anymore. We built a youth wellness center. It's kind of a graduation program, so they don't need the intensive work. They can show up and see us, and they help others here. So that's a very good question, though. We do track these kids long term. The interesting thing about therapeutic mentoring, the youth ask us for references for jobs and for college, and you don't usually ask your psychologist for that, but the relationship of sharing time outside is just different to that level. It's fun to write.
Peter, another question is regarding recruiting these young people, because you might think that it's a very good treatment to take them out in the nature and connect them with the roots and so on. But what about these young people in very different positions? How do you recruit them?
Yeah, so they get referred to us, and again, our service is intensive, so it's reserved for kids who really are suffering, and sometimes they don't want to do it. They just reject it. But and that's okay. We meet them, we offer to take them out, and they say nope. But then maybe if a young person is suffering like that, a month later, maybe something else happens, and then they remember, okay, my parents or the judge or the school is making me go to therapy. Oh, there was that nice guy who offered to take me kayaking for therapy, and they come back to us. So, but there is, we have a lot of kids who, come from the city, and we have to be very intentional to help make them feel comfortable in nature. I mean, we have kids, this is more in our school program, but we have kids who are scared to sit on the ground. They're frightened of insects. And so we have to be very compassionate and very patient and skillful. And I'm sure you see this too in your nature programs. Some kids are scared of nature, but we tend to be a really attractive option compared to sitting on a couch, or sometimes some of our kids are ordered by the judge to be in our program, and they can be resistant, but then we have a very good record of recruitment, of conversion. We convert the kids to liking the program.
So do you also experience that sometimes you have to abort a treatment to send the kids back, or it's simply not possible to work with them in the nature, or is it just happiness when they first are part of your program? Or
yeah, we work with some very we usually don't have problems in our program, but we definitely will start with a kid, and then they'll do something and get arrested and go to jail, and then we try again when they come out of jail, and then they go back. We don't have a perfect record of success, but we haven't and we can pick up a kid from school who's had such a bad day that we change the plan. Like we're not, this isn't, you know, the child is too dysregulated to even put them in our car. And we're like, okay, you had a bad day. We're just going to go for a walk right here and then eat a little food. And so we have to be very careful. We, you know, some of our kids, you know, they trigger and it can be really serious. So yeah, and you know, it doesn't always work. I mean, we have very, very challenging cases, but we have a much better track record than the standard system of care. Much better. And that's what we're doing research about now. And it's challenging to get all those records, but we're doing more like public health research that's in our near future.
Are the kids, are they staying outside there at your place in the mountains, or are they transported to your center and then back again? How is it going on?
Yeah, very good question. I need to make that clear. So in the United States, you probably this too, there's a thing called wilderness therapy. That's not what we do. Kids are not sent. We work with kids in our region. So we just pick them up from school, spend 3 or 4 hours and take them home and then do it again next week. So it's just like therapy, but it's a longer session and it's once a week. So the kids are not sent away to us. And then, you know, for a month or something, we work with the kids 1 day a week, every week, you know, and they're still in home. They're still at their home. They're still in their school. They're still in their community.
So are you using the local surroundings? I mean, the local place, the nearby nature and so on, so they get used to using these kind of areas in the local neighborhood.
Yeah, when it works well, they start using nature as their own resource, and they go there on other days, and they take their mom with them, or that's what I said, you know, it's beautiful, and they take their own family out on the walks.
Yeah. One final question before small short break. How do you get the funds? Are the funds? Is it easy to get funding for these kind of treatments?
No, it's not easy, but it's not easy at all. But we did the work to get we say we infiltrated the system. So we have these big systems of government behavioral health care, and we are the only nature-based therapy program that's certified by Medi-Cal in the state of California. So it's very tedious, a lot of bureaucracy, and I'm sure we're the smallest company that's certified by Medi-Cal too. But that's what we want to do. We want to change the system by infiltrating it. So we get paid by the government, but we do have a lot of kids who do not get into that system. So we fundraise for the unfunded kids. And then our local hospital now pays us for some of those unfunded kids, because we work with kids who were going to the hospital with suicide attempts or psychiatric crisis. And they see that when they start working with us, they don't have to go anymore. And when a kid goes to the hospital in the United States, it's very expensive. Even if they have no money, the hospital is paying it's expensive for the hospital. So they appreciate us because we divert them and they succeed in treatment and avoid expensive crises. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. There are several other questions. I'm sorry, we cannot answer all of them. We'll try to follow up on them. And also, Peter, you share some of your materials. We'll send it to all you guys who have signed up for this seminar. So we'll send it to you later on. Until now, well, thank you very much, Peter. It has been an experience and very nice to hear about your experiences in California. We hope to see you next year, and
yes.
Thank you very much.